We are non-profit, open source organization. For years, we have been part of the Oak Island Foundation as the initiative. So we had the Oak Island board overviewing us. Now we're an independent foundation. I'll say a few more words on that. Of course, the inspiration, a lot came from, this is a brilliant framework and simplification of many of the global challenges and making them at least feel manageable. And Jacob and his team has done a tremendous job. He will be speaking a little bit later in Fredrik's work, how this has become a global movement where so many countries have signed, and there Jacob knows a lot more and will share some stories. But the interesting part here is, of course, the inner is missing. And once we talk about the inner, everybody has their own method, framework, tools. So the very crazy idea that came about was, could we do something similar for the inner and not being the UN calling it out? Could we still initiate something like that and simplify inner development? I mean, external challenges are incredibly complex, but we managed to reduce the complexity with the symbols, with the goals, and feel, okay, it's not, the world is not just a mess, we can navigate it. We have 17 global areas to focus on, 169 sub-goals. Yes, I'm learning, Jacob. So what we have tried to do, and here is with the new design, is to see how can the inner be an accelerator? How can working with the inner support being better facing the global challenges? And hopefully this is what we aim for, right? And here what we're trying to do also is, I think we might not have goals forever, but the inner development will always be important. And let's see where this goes. Because yes, of course, there might be that we will need to find a different narrative after 2030. But we're quite secure that this is also why inner development goals framework is just a way of communicating that inner development matters. The best thing that could happen if the SDGs or the next structure after SDGs integrate the inner development, then we don't need to push our own framework or so. And we can just work on the practices and still do the good that we... So the best thing is that we wouldn't need to exist because... And we have sisters and brothers already. You know, the European Union have developed... what's the framework called? Help me. Green Competencies Framework. And we should embrace that and support that. All these frameworks are pointing to the same thing, and they're great. So it's not about competing with others. It's making sure it's integrated in society. And here I think it does make sense. I mean, we already looked at the purpose. Our vision is a world where inner development is unlocking. So there is also this understanding that it's not a state where inner development has unlocked. It will always be a process when it's unlocking our power to build a flourishing future for people and planet. And of course, the mission with the global movement, going back to advocates, and enables integration, which is some of the key words there. And how we have come to these conclusions, we have as what we call all stakeholder meetings. So 2 times per year, we gather our partners, we gather our co-founders, we gather our scientific advisors, we invite selected members from the hubs to try to have some stakeholders from the whole community. And then we present our strategy, we present our thoughts, we get feedback on the language or on the strategy, and we try to iterate that. So that has been a beautiful process, a very difficult process, because it also takes time to work in that way, but a very important one. And I think these 5 guiding principles were created here, I think when we just had one PowerPoint and building the IDG website, and they have served us really, really well, but I think we can also continue working with them. This will be a session also tomorrow. Of course, the journey of co-creation being really, really important, because if we truly understand, in my language, the adaptiveness and complexity of this challenge, there is no way we can work with this alone. We need so many institutions, so many perspectives to shift the whole narrative. We understand also that this is an emerging movement, and of course an ecosystem, I think, is a good way to relate to that. The whole intention is to simplify so that inner development can become IKEA-fied, as somebody said, right? So that there is more people that can relate to it and feel that they can understand it. From Joanna Macy, I think, and also from me just being much more in the sustainability field, there is a lot of sorrow. There is a lot of feelings of anxiety, of overwhelm, of not moving in the right direction. And we can see from the science also, if we lose joy, we're not going to have anything. So we need to be in touch with the gratitude, with the joy, with the playfulness, because also we can learn from religion if inner development that the religious communities have been so good at fostering for some periods, but if it becomes too much a must, we lose that, right? And we've seen the shadows of that also. And of course, understanding that we're all incomplete, that we will prototype and make mistakes and hopefully invite feedback. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, because some of the shadows of the inner development community in general is also we're not always inviting feedback, because it's so great to just do something and then say, oh, it felt great and everybody was joyous. But it's quite a painful process to invite feedback. And I think here with the movement, there is more and more also psychologists that film their sessions and show to their mentors to learn from that. There is more and more realization now when psychologists are being educated. One of my close friends is going through the psychology program, is much different with feedback than it was before. Before, the inner development was something so personal that you shouldn't touch somehow. And of course there are elements that we should keep maybe sacred also, but we also need to invite, especially when we work with groups and methods, the feedback. So I'm going to spend a few moments talking about our long-term objectives, again co-created. And this, when we talk long-term, what is long-term? I mean long-term that we can grasp as a movement that is 3 years old. So at least for the 5 to 10 years to come, what we think is really important for the field. And the first part is a narrative shift. Right now, and I don't know about the people you hang out with, but I have a lot of friends and family members who think for each day that they don't talk with anybody about their inside or problems, they are winning. One more day without seeing a psychologist, yeah! That's the Russian-Ukrainian spirit, at least. Yeah. No, and honestly, and I have friends and family also here in Sweden with the same mindset, that it's like, if you don't need to open that inner box, you're strong and all is good, right? Like, unless your engine is broken, you don't open that up. And there needs to be a narrative shift around it, around the stigma, actually, of inner development, or working on oneself, or on one's leadership team or organization. That's one. The second part, a lot of the inner development narrative right now is once you have everything else, you have a nice house, you have a nice car, you can do a little bit of inner development, as sugar on the cake, right? I mean, that's something that rich people can afford and do once they, like, some people ride horses, others have a hobby of inner development. And I don't think that narrative is helping us. Because if we look at the Nordic secret and the meta-modernity, some of the meta-crisis and how we face that, that needs to be a fundamental building block of society. And unless we get our game together and we do inner development at scale, we're not going to make it. So that's the huge narrative shift that we need to bridge. So integrating inner development in especially facing any complex challenges. And that is something that is not the person's responsibility, that is not the person's stigma or blame, like, hey, I'm not developed enough, I need some help here. It's something that our organization, institutions, schools should be doing from early age throughout the society. So here there is a lot of work of writing white papers, of advocating for that. We had a very professional TV team here. Hopefully the IDGs will be featured on a TV channel, reaching millions. There is a lot of work just in shifting the narrative and telling a different story. Second one, you said we're a community of practice, right? So if inner development is real, it's a practice. Otherwise, it's just another idea. Who here practices inner development? Yeah. I mean, we all meditate, we reflect, we do courses. This hopefully is a practice of just going away, trying something else. And the thing is, there are good and bad practices. And this is one of the shadows that we also will be focusing a little bit on day 3, because not everything that inner flies, and how do we create a container where we can scale the good practices, and especially if we're speaking to a larger group. I mean, Christine was saying that healing is not always a word that is helpful in all contexts. So how do we speak in a way that we don't scare away the skeptics? If I'm thinking about my relative here in Sweden that really like in his 60s and he thinks like, okay, the more I'm not touching a leadership developer or a psychologist, the stronger and better I am. How do we use the language and speak to that person so they dare to test and practice something and say, oh wait, I actually got some good insights here. I want to continue this so that we can integrate good practices. And of course, we all want to end up there at the policy and structural changes, because that's where the real shifts and change happen. But I don't think it's possible without these two. And just to give some examples, in Sweden at least, if I buy a book on compassion, I pay 6% tax. If I go a course in nonviolent communication or self-compassion, I pay 25% of tax, right? So we're already in the structures inviting people to more read and intellectualize around it than actually practice something, which is very strange. And we can build systems that make it easier for people to integrate into society, into organizations, good practices around inner development, and we can make it more easily accessible for people. But for that we need the narrative shift, we need enough people that are practicing and seeing the benefits of the practice so that we can start changing the structures and the policy changes, and this we will be speaking a little bit more about as well. So my invitation to you is to just 3 and 3, as you sit, reflect on these long-term objectives